Okay, this is part 3. In parts 1 and 2, we set up this network and we configured this switch for SSH. Here are the commands we use to configure switch 1. And now what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to SSH connect from this switch to this switch. In the last video, we were able to connect from this PC into the switch on VLAN 99, which we set up as a management VLAN so we could have remote access to the switch through SSH instead of Telnet, because SSH is encrypted. So we set up SSH version 2. Now what we're going to do is we're going to try to expand on that. Now, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this switch and show a different way of connecting to the switch. Instead of using just the regular admin password that you use, we're going to try to set up a username password to set up an actual Cisco user. So I'll hit enter and I'll type enable and I'll put in the password Cisco, and then I'm going to go to global config mode. Right? Now I'm in global config mode and I'm going to type in username, let's say Dan, and then I'll type secret for secret password, right, encrypted, and I will let's say type in let me in. Okay, and we'll hit enter, and so now we have a user named Dan with a encrypted password called let me in, and this username and password is put into the Cisco Switch's local database. So it's able to maintain a database of users and passwords right on the Cisco Switch, and you could also do this for a Cisco router, right? So the next thing I need to do is I need to go to line VTY, virtual terminal access, right, 0 to 15, right? And when we set it up before, we set in just login, right? But if we want to set it up so that when we log in through the terminal, remote in with SSH, and we want to use the local username and database, what we can do is put in this command, login local, right? So now that should work. And let's just test that out really quickly. So I'll go to this PC and I'll open up a command prompt, and what I'll do is I'll say I've got SSH-L for login, then I put in the username Dan, right, and then the IP address 2.168.99.2, right, and then my password, let me in, hit enter, and I'm in. So that worked. So that's a more advanced way of connecting to your switch or your router or your Cisco network device by using a username password scenario as opposed to just the default one password for all type of management, right? Okay, so now we're going to set up this switch to connect to this switch with SSH. And the reason we can do that is on these switches, these 3560 switches in Packet Tracer, they have SSH Server installed, version 1 and version 2, and they also have SSH Client. So if you didn't have a client, you could use this other switch as a client to connect to the server. Okay, so let's wire it up. I'm going to get my cables here. I'm going to need a crossover cable since it's switch to switch. And for this switch, I'm going to use 023, and I'll just use the same port over here just to match. So we've got fast Ethernet port 23 to port 23 with a crossover cable. All right. I'm going to go into the top switch, and I'm going to need to turn that port or make that port VLAN 99 accessible, right? So I'll hit end, and then I'll say conft, and I'll say interface FA 0/23 to go into port 23, and then I'll do switch port mode access, and then switch port access VLAN 99. All right, and now that port will be able to communicate on VLAN 99, right? Okay, now that we're done with that, we have to set up the other switch port, and we have to configure a few other things in the other switch. So for the other switch, once again, I'm just cheating by clicking on the switch and going to the command line interface here, as opposed to clicking on the PC and doing a console terminal connection into the switch. And one of the reasons I like to do that is I can make the text here bigger in this command line interface so that it's easier to see in the video. All right, so what I'll do is I'll type enable and then conft, and I'll change the host name of this switch, host name, to switch 2, so that we know the difference now between switch 2 and switch 1. That's switch 1, and now this one, the bottom one, is switch 2. All right, and I'm going to say VLAN 99 to create VLAN 99. I'll give it a name, the same name as we used before, MGT, for management. So now we have a management VLAN. I'm going to go into interface. Wait, I got to get out of there. Control C, conf T, back to global config mode, interface VLAN 99. And now I'm in my virtual interface for VLAN 99, right? And I can give it an IP address. So I'll say IP address 192.168.99.3, also the subnet mask. All right, and now I'll do a no shutdown, no shut. All right, and now I've set up this IP address for the switch, right? By default, the switches do not come with the IP address. You have to configure it for them, and we configured that on the virtual interface for VLAN 99. Okay, so now I should be able to ping this switch. Let's give it a try. All right. I don't think, though, I set up the interface yet for, let's just double check. Show, run. Port 23 has not been set to VLAN 99 yet, so that's not going to work. But I've got my virtual interface VLAN 99 with the IP address. So if you hover over the switch, you can tell which ports have been configured for which VLAN. Okay, so we got to do that. So back into it and stretch this out one more time. I'm going to hit spacebar more. Conf T to get to global config mode. Interface FA 0/23 and SW tab switch port mode access. So now it's an access port as opposed to a trunk port. And then SW tab switch port access VLAN 99. Okay. So now you can see it said that change state to up. So that should be good. We should be able to ping the switch now. We'll try. All right, it's trying to ping, and it might take a second for the two switches to learn each other's MAC addresses for this to work. So, all right, and all of a sudden there it is, started working. So we can communicate with the switch. So now that we can communicate to the switch, we can try to SSH from this switch, which we're in right now, switch 2, into the first switch. So I'll type in SSH space and a question mark, and you can see that I need to put the version and the login with the username. So what I'll do is I'll say SSH-V space 2 for version 2, then space -L for login. For username, I'll say Dan, right? Then I'll put question mark. It says I need the IP address, right, or the host name of the remote system, right? So I'll put in 192.168.99.2, right? Hit enter and open password, right? And type in let me in, and we're in.